So we are just hours away from Four Nations FaceOff Championship game, Team USA, Team Canada. It's been a massive hit, this tournament. And joining us now, you heard him on the call on TNT for both games from TD Garden in Boston on Monday. The great Kenny Albert here with us. Kenny, was there any way when you saw this tournament was happening, you got your assignments, was there any part of you that thought it was going to be as big of a hit as it's been?
I was certainly hoping so. You know, we found out about it about a year ago and then knew about our assignments back in August, September when the schedule came out, that our crew, along with Eddie Olczyk, Brian Boucher, Jackie Redmond, that we would be calling the two games in Boston on Monday and watch the games from Montreal from afar on television. And of course, the USA-Canada game on Saturday night was incredible. So certainly hoping that it would turn into this. The NHL players had not been involved in a best-on-best since 2016 World Cup of Hockey. Of course, the NHL did not go to the Olympics in 2018 and 2022. So I think in the weeks leading up to it, Jonathan, being around coaches and players that were involved, you really started to sense the excitement level. And from a fan and viewer perspective, that certainly picked up over the last week or so, ever since the game started up in Montreal.
Now, like I said, you did both games on Monday at TD Garden. Did you find, especially at night when the U.S. was playing Sweden, because we knew it's U.S.-Canada in a few nights, was the atmosphere a little bit toned down?
You know, going into that day, you know, we knew the different scenarios that if Canada or Finland won in regulation, they would clinch a spot in the championship game. But if that game went to overtime, then Sweden would still be alive. So, you know, I'd be lying if I told you there were a lot of us involved with the broadcast that weren't rooting for overtime in that first game. Canada wound up winning in regulation. You know, they were terrific, took a 4-0 lead. Finland came back with the two late goals to pull two within one before the Crosby empty netter. So going into that USA-Sweden game, we knew it didn't mean anything as far as, you know, the championship game and which team would advance. Sweden had already been eliminated. But when we spoke to the head coach of the Swedish team, Sam Hallam, at about 5:30, we realized, you know what, this game's going to be pretty good too, because, you know, he reminded us, A, there's a lot of pride in that locker room. B, they wanted to finish on a winning note. They had lost both previous games in overtime, 4-3 to Canada, 4-3 to Finland. And all of the players on that Swedish roster, they're aiming for the Olympics next year. So they want to put their best foot forward. And when the game started, it did have the feel of a meaningful game, even though it really wasn't. So, and the U.S. had so many injuries, players out of the lineup. So from their perspective, they knew that they would be in the championship game. But Sweden came to play, and they won the game 2-1. It did sort of have the feel of, I would say, an Olympic game or an NHL playoff game, even though the meaning wasn't, you know, as much as it could have been.
What is it like doing two games? Like, just from a broadcaster perspective now, you did a 1 p.m. game, you did an 8 p.m. game. You got to know the players for all four teams, you know, all the different line combinations. How difficult is it to prepare for that day?
Well, first of all, it's a lot of fun. It's a long day. You know, I was pretty tired at the end of the day when I got back to the hotel, but, you know, there are a lot harder things we could all be doing. I'm sitting there calling 2 hockey games over the course of 12 hours. I've had, you know, during Olympics in the past, I've worked 6 Olympics on the hockey side, Winter Olympics. So I've had during, you know, those times, a lot of double headers. During the bubble in Edmonton, the NHL playoff bubble, I worked several double headers, including 2 days with 3 games, believe it or not. Pierre Maguire and I in Edmonton twice worked 3 NHL playoff games in one day. 1 o'clock, I think 4:30, and then 8 o'clock. So, you know, those are some of the days that you look back on. They're so much fun. You know, as far as the rosters, I watched the 4 games for Montreal, so it's all the same teams. They're all such recognizable names and numbers. They're all NHL players, although some of them were wearing different numbers. I love the color schemes, the United States in blue, Canada red, Sweden in yellow or gold, and Finland in white. So, you know, at first, heading into it, I remember thinking to myself, this might be a little challenging because some players are wearing different numbers. And the Swedes and Finns, for example, in the NHL, you have one or two of them on every team. But now here you have 20 Finnish names all on one team. But it wasn't that bad. Got used to it pretty quickly. But having the opportunity to watch and sort of scout during those 4 prior games where they were all playing with each other made it a lot easier.
You know, I'm watching your broadcast on Monday night, and you got my guy, Matthew Tkachuk, in the booth with you and Eddie Olczyk. And I love the passion. I love how much they care about this game tonight. But I was still a little bit stunned when Matthew Tkachuk says he thinks this is going to be the biggest game of his life. He just played in and won Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Does that surprise you?
You know, I heard him say that, and I think when he looks back, they'll probably be pretty equal, I would think, winning a Game 7 of a Stanley Cup and then playing in the final of the Four Nations. For some of the other players who haven't played in the playoffs or advanced past the first or second round, I could see certainly where this would be the biggest game of their life to this point. But, you know, Matthew's in the moment. He's had such an unbelievable time playing with his brother and with his, you know, countrymen and following in the steps of their father, who was a part of 4 Olympics and the 1996 World Cup of hockey, scored some big goals in that tournament, was involved in some extracurricular activity as well back in 96 against Canada. So, no, it should be a great night tonight. And, you know, hopefully Matthew, Brady, both in the lineup. You know, I know Charlie McAvoy's in a bit of a different situation now. Austin Matthews sat out the last game with the injury, or at least, you know, just was banged up a little bit. Not sure exactly what it was, but that was fun having Matthew up there with us in the booth. He's such a great guy, represents, you know, himself, his family, his team, his country, the sports so well. I know you've gotten to know him, and just really happy for his success in this tournament. He and Brady both scoring 2 goals in that opening game, and I'm sure they'll be raring to go here tonight.
You know, we could probably say this a little bit about Brady, but Matthew especially. I feel like because of the role that he has had during this tournament here, he is like, we're talking, he was already a star in the NHL, but it feels like he now has superstar status.
Absolutely. And the 2 long playoff runs the last 2 years, scoring all of the overtime goals in the playoffs 2 years ago, the 4 overtime game against Carolina. I was there for that one, that whole series. And then winning the cup last year, you know, certainly has become one of the top superstars in the NHL, one of the top American players. And hopefully he's, you know, a top player in the league for many years to come. His brother Brady, a couple of years younger, you know, plays in the Canadian market as Matthew did at the start of his career. But 2 great personalities. Every team in the league would love to have a Matthew Tkachuk or a Brady Tkachuk, just the style they play, you know, the goal scoring, the physical play, the toughness, the leadership. You know, they're really the prototype for what teams will look for in a top line power forward.
So I'm going to preface this with, obviously, you're a hockey broadcaster, which is an amazing job. Even when it's tiring, it's still, you're calling hockey, you're not laying brick. But you mentioned, you know, the 4 overtime game, Matthew Tkachuk with the winner against Carolina. What was that like by the time you got to the end? Because as a viewer, and I'm watching the game in my family room, and it's past 2 a.m., and this game's been going on for 6 hours. Like, thank God the Panthers won from my perspective. But, man, once we got, like, really late in the night, it was a difficult watch. I wouldn't want to ever do that again.
That game might have set the record for most icings, especially in the overtimes. Some of the players were so tired and there were so many icings. But from a broadcasting perspective, I was rooting for it to go to a 5th overtime. You want to set a record at that point. There haven't been many games that have gone that long. I think it made it into the top 5. So I was hoping it went to a 5th and then a 6th. But when it did end, I wasn't tired during the game because the adrenaline carries you through. And you have to be mentally sharp. You know, whenever that goal is scored and it was in the closing 15 seconds of the 4th overtime, you don't want to make a mistake. So you really have to stay focused and sharp. I think what helped us that night, normally in Carolina, the broadcast booth is all the way upstairs, similar to the Panthers arena. you're pretty high up and you don't necessarily feel the energy of the crowd. Fortunately, in that series in Raleigh, we were down behind the first concourse in a makeshift booth, a little bit to the right inside the blue line, but at least you could feel the energy of the crowd. And I think that helped us carry through that night, as opposed to, if we had been in the regular broadcast booth. We got back to the hotel about 2:30 in the morning. And again, the adrenaline carries you through the game. But I remember waking up the next day, I was exhausted. I felt like I played in the game. I felt like I got hit by a ton of bricks. And that next night, Eddie Olczyk and Keith Jones and I actually went to a Durham Bulls minor league baseball game. And I don't think we made it through the whole thing. We stayed for about 5 or 6 innings, but we were still exhausted that next evening.
Unbelievable. Do you think we're going to get any fighting tonight? I don't believe so. I think we got it all out of our system. We put all of our chips on the table on Saturday night. I don't think we're going to see any of that tonight.
I would tend to agree with you. But, unless it happens organically, you never know what might happen in a hockey game when two players come together. If there's a hit that one player or one of the teams deems was, illegal. So, the emotions do carry across sometimes. So never say never, but I would agree, as far as they probably got that stuff out of their system on Saturday.
Do you think any NHL...
You don't want to take the chance of getting an extra penalty for instigating, cross-checking, roughing, because there haven't been too many penalties called in every game in this tournament. The officials are letting them play, so you don't want to be the one to give, for example, McDavid, McKinnon, Makar, Crosby, that first, you don't want to give them an extra power play opportunity.
How much of a difference maker, Kel Makar didn't play Saturday night. For folks who maybe, are listening and they don't know what a difference that makes, what does that mean that he is going to be in the lineup tonight?
No, it's huge. I mean, if he were in the lineup Saturday, maybe that accounts for one more goal for Canada or one less goal for the U.S. On the United States side, you didn't have Quinn Hughes going into the tournament, who would have been tremendous on the power play, and now no Charlie McAvoy. So injury certainly a factor. And for Canada, without Makar, that was a big factor on Saturday night.
Tonight with the anthem, I'm hoping there's no booing from our American fans there in Boston. What do you think that there's going to be booing of the Canadian anthem?
Right, I hope not. There wasn't much during the Canadian anthem on Monday, but then again, they were playing Finland. They weren't playing the U.S. And, hopefully the fans are, behaving at their best level, and it should just be a great night. I know tickets, very hard to come by, obviously. And, those who are lucky enough to be in the building tonight, hopefully it's a treat and a lifetime memory for them.
Doesn't it feel like the perfect storm right now with the NHL, where they've been doing so well since moving to TNT and ESPN? You get more coverage, and also just the tournament's been great, but it's also happening at the same time where you got the NBA with the All-Star, and they're a disaster. They're the players, they don't try hard. And PK Subban has been on ESPN the last couple of days talking about the passion that hockey players have. And it feels like it's a little bit of a perfect storm for the NHL right now.
Right. And you make a good point. TNT, and I'm biased, but TNT and ESPN have done a great job. But don't discount the job NBC did for 15 years. And I was a part of that. NBC did an unbelievable job of broadcasting NHL hockey for about a decade and a half, and raising the profile of the sport, with some of the best announcers and the implementation of the outdoor games and the inside the glass position. And what, the networks now have hopefully taken that bar and raised it even higher. At TNT, unbelievable pregame show with Liam, Diz, Anson, Wayne Gretzky, Henrik Lundqvist, many others involved as well. And love working with Eddie and Bush on the games. Brendan Burke and Darren Pang do a great job. And I have some great friends and terrific broadcasters over at ESPN as well. So they're fortunate to have the game tonight. We're lucky enough to have the Stanley Cup final this year. That alternates every year. So I'll be watching tonight, and saw a lot of those guys up in Boston on Monday. And Tuesday, I was emceeing a terrific event involving the NHL and the Christopher Reeve Foundation. Sean McDonough was there. Mark Messier was there. The commissioner, Gary Bettman. So a lot of cross-pollination between those of us at TNT and ESPN over the last couple of days.
You were there with our mutual friend, Alan Brown.
Alan's the best. I was just texting with him. It was so great to see Alan. What a job he's done with his foundation. They had a big sled hockey game last night, U.S. against Canada. Alan and Will Reeve, the son of Christopher and Dana Reeve. Alan delivered a great pregame speech. If you haven't seen it in the locker room, I think he's this generation's Herb Brooks, if you haven't seen the video yet. So Alan heavily involved in the event that I mentioned on Tuesday night, which was, again, so fortunate and honored to be a part of that along with Alan and the others.
Kenny, excellent job. Enjoy the game tonight. It's been such a tremendous showcase for the NHL, and I hope the momentum just continues for the league. It's such a great sport. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jonathan. Always great to be with you. Enjoy the game tonight, and let's do it again soon.